Hello and welcome to episode 37 of the Peterpodcast. I'm your host, reporter Taylor Clydesdale, and with me this week is Dave Haacke. Dave is running for re-election in North Crest Ward in the October municipal election, and today we're going to be talking about why he voted the way he did to sell PDI.
I was one of the original six that signed the letter asking the Ontario government not to sell Hydro One because I thought it was a bad idea. But they did, and the rules changed. And now we're left dealing with what those rule changes were. And that's the thing. I think people vote councillors in to do the best thing that they can think is in the best interest of the city at that time with the information that they have, and that's what I did.
And we're also going to be talking about the housing market and the construction of new subdivisions. So, hope you enjoy the show.
My name's Dave Haacke. I've been a resident of North Crest Ward just under 30 years now. Married father of two grandchildren. They're actually at the house right now. They're from Calgary. And my daughter's staying with us for a month, which is really, really nice. I've been involved in politics one way or the other since I was 16 years old. A friend of mine in Oshawa was running for the school board, and he asked me if I'd help him, and I said sure. I had no idea what I was doing, so I went door to door. So I was 16 years old. He went on actually to be president of the Liberal Party of Ontario and an MPP in David Peterson's government. What I'd like to say is we haven't spoken since, but no, that's not true. We're actually still very good friends, and Al Furlong is his name. He's currently a member of the Durham Regional Police Service Board, and I was on ours. So he's the one that started the whole thing for me.
Okay. And right now you're running for re-election.
Yes, everybody said, what's it like? I don't know. First time I've ever run for re-election, run for a lot of elections. But I totally enjoyed myself the past 4 years. My first meeting at council, Henry Clark said, Dave, 4 years will fly by. And I said, I don't think so, because I was very nervous that first night. But boy, it did. It really did fly by. I really enjoy working in the ward, more so than the public stuff. I do like getting the calls and actually helping the people with their problems, because they're big problems for them. Mm-hmm. Whether it's snow clearing isn't being done right, or somebody parking on the street, or dogs or cats. That's what I get the kick out of.
Have you been going door to door already? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, started that in July.
Okay.
Yep.
And I know you and your ward mate, Andrew Beamer, you kind of have a reputation for going out and talking to people at the door.
Well, we started, funny enough, Taylor, I think it was in 17, it might have been a bit earlier, it was winter, spring, and there was an issue on Marina Boulevard up in the north end, and there was cars on both sides of the street all the time. You could barely get a bus by, so the people had called and said, can you help us out? So we directed them to the traffic people at City Hall, and they decided if you come up with signatures, and you needed 60% of the residents in that area to agree, and they go to end of month 1st to the 15th and 16th to the end of month parking and alternate the streets. So I said to Andrew, why don't we go door knocking and see if we can get the people interested in it? So that's how it started. And we did that once, and people were very surprised that we were out banging on doors. So we did it about every 5 weeks or so. After that, we picked different areas of town, and we just went around and chatted with people. And because it was an election, I think that they were more apt and easygoing to talk to us about stuff, and they told us, what their concerns were, or if they had any concerns. So it was, I think, a very good public process.
So now that you're knocking on the door for an election, what are some of the things that you're hearing at the door that from people in your ward?
The biggest issue still in North Crest is traffic. And you can see it on every street. The streets weren't designed to carry the volumes. So that's number one. Number two, funny enough, is not taxes. What I'm hearing more is we want jobs that my kids can stay in town. Now, I have a daughter who lives in Calgary. For that reason, I have another daughter just got transferred from Peterborough going to Halifax, and we'd sure like to have them in town. So, and taxes, but taxes, it wasn't so much taxes, it was how you spend them. We get asked a lot how to spend it. And it breaks down. Taxes are a funny animal, as you know. There's the operational side and the capital side. And I think on their operational side this year it's like 1.89% increase, which is pretty close to inflation. I think that's as best you can do. The capital side is a different cat altogether, and that's a bit more difficult because people, they complain about the roads, and rightfully so. I mean, Charlotte Street we're redoing, but Charlotte Street's an extreme example because parts of it are buckled.
Yeah.
But that costs a lot of money. We've got $1.9 billion in infrastructure that we're responsible for. And so you've got roads on one side, people want the roads. Then you want amenities, so people want arenas. They want all different facilities, and that's the balance that we're always struggling with at council.
And I've asked, people who aren't on council, who are running for council now, what do you think those discussions are like, and how do you see yourself as being a part of them? But you've been a part of those discussions, and you've helped negotiate and figure out the budget. What's that experience like?
Well, it's a real eye-opener. We'll step back a bit from the budget process and look at municipal council. What surprised me the most is almost every single thing we do is prescribed by the province. Everything. You want to have a meeting about this? It goes in the paper. It does, and they lay it out. And that is the transparency that the people want. Now, what comes along with that transparency, unfortunately, is time and money. So to be very transparent with the rules that we have, with the province is saying, so you know the setup. If we have a general committee meeting which handles planning, it has to go into the newspaper at this certain time under the plan, at certain days, advance notice, so on, and then an appeal period and all the rest of it. In my business, I can change something tomorrow. I don't have to go through a planning. I don't have to go through any process other than what I think is the right thing to do. So while people get frustrated with it, they get more frustrated when they don't feel that the city allows them an opportunity to voice their concerns. They get really frustrated when they voice those concerns and it appears that the city doesn't listen. But that's, I can honestly say, for almost everybody on council, we do listen to everything. We may disagree, but it could be because we have a bit more information in some cases. But there's things that you look at doing for the ward, and there's things you look at doing for the city. But getting back to your question on the budgeting, the budgeting process it starts as soon as we finish the last budget. And it's quite an involved process from across the board. But if you look at the numbers, really, the last 4 years, I've only supported 2 budgets. Anything under 3% I was in favor of. Anything over 3% I felt we didn't need to do. Typically, it was more related to the capital side, but that's part of the balancing act. With the operations side, again, you're dealing with the personnel, the unions, everything. So it's pretty prescribed. So anybody that thinks that they're going to come in and change that process, they're not going to. It's just the way that it is. So the budgeting process, we're getting better. Certainly, it's been more public on the processes. We tried the ward $20,000 grant that we're looking at for the best idea, and we'll put it out there as long as there's no operational costs, ongoing operational costs, and participatory budgeting, it was called. That's the word I was looking for. Mixed on that, but it is what it is.
You had mentioned a little bit earlier about listening and engagement with council, and something that I hear often as a criticism of this council is that it doesn't engage often, or it doesn't engage with the public the way that it should. Is that something that you see with council now? Is that a problem that needs to be fixed, or because is like a problem that I hear over and over again? I guess
for me, it's subjective, and we'll use PDI. PDI is a good example of what I felt was wide-ranging public engagement. They called it a dog and pony show, but it was information that was put out there. So I guess a lot of it can be somewhat subjective sometimes. We did sit through a lot of people's presentation on it, and in the end they're saying we didn't listen, which again I would say was wrong, and I'll tell you why. The original deal that we had was for 5 years. Well, the new deal ended up being 11 plus years. So we listened to what the people had to say. We took it back to Hydro One, and they reworked the deal. So to say the ultimate outcome, it was sold, which some people didn't want. They say 90%. You saw the poll that they used. I looked at it, and I meant to bring it with me. But one of the questions, it said, your city council is receiving an annual return on this investment, and they're going to lose that. They'll get a one-time lump sum payment, and they'll lose that annual contribution. As far as it went, that was true. But it's what you did with that one-time contribution that we figured would double, possibly triple the return that we're getting. So the highest return we were getting from the PDI portion was $1.6 million. This year it's at $800,000. John Stevenson figures it might come back up to about $1 million. But we can take the $55-60 million, invest it, which we can do, and there's argument about that. But I believe that we can invest it in 5%, and you're going to get $2.5 to $3 million, which is far greater than what you have. What people maybe don't realize is I was one of the original 6 that signed the letter asking the Ontario government not to sell Hydro One because I thought it was a bad idea. But they did, and the rules changed. And now we're left dealing with what those rule changes were. And that's the thing. I think people vote councillors in to do the best thing that they can think is in the best interest of the city at that time with the information that they have, and that's what I did.
Okay, so... But
that's a great example of the public engagement, and I think it was good. Don't confuse public engagement with agreeing. Because that doesn't always happen, but people have their say, and again, I keep coming back to that example. Without that public engagement, those people, we wouldn't have an 11-year deal. What I heard too, people were complaining about energy poverty and energy security. We gave it to them for 11 years. Now, what happens beyond that? I mean, anybody can speculate. Can it go to 1,000%? I highly doubt it, that there's going to be a big increase, but who knows? I don't think anybody can tell you what's going to happen 11 years out, but we can tell you what's going to happen for the next 11.
And the comments that you made, it evokes a question that I've asked a lot of other councillors, or council candidates, which is, when you have information in front of you that, let's use PDI as an example, but this can extend to the Parkway or some other issue that no one knows what's going to come up until it does, where, the information you have in front of you says, you have this deal. You have option A, which is, you're going to be making more money than you are now. The dollars and cents make sense to you. City staff support option A. And then you have, people who are in the public who say, no, for reasons X, Y, and Z, the preservation of green space or we want to keep our utilities public. We support option B instead. And there's a balance between going with the facts that you're given by your staff and the people in your ward who say, no, we want the opposite. It's a weird balance between the facts that you have at hand and the people in your ward who, the majority of which want something.
Well, Taylor, I think if politics was about saying, yes, I know a million people that would be great politicians, but I do believe it's more about saying no with the information that you have. People say you're supposed to represent us. Yes, and I felt that I was representing everybody, not just my ward, everybody in the city when I voted to do what I felt was in the best interests of the city at that time. And I have no qualms about it. If the people elect me again, great. I'd love to do it again. If I lose because of that, then unfortunately I lose. But I know I did what I believed to be in the best interests of the city. The Parkway is another example. You have a great divide on the Parkway where people that aren't really affected by it don't want it. People in our ward are. I mean, traffic is the number one issue in North Crescent. It's not going to get any better with Lily Lake coming on and the expansion at Heritage subdivision where I live currently. So, again, I don't think anybody's there to do anything other than what they believe is the right thing. The people that voted for the sale of PDI and the people that didn't.
Oh, no. And I personally speaking, I have no doubt that everyone who voted in favor or voted against the sale only had the best interest of the community at mind when they voted in that way. It's just a question of whether or not what the person who was elected on council, what they think the best interests of the community are, and the people who are in the community, what they think the best interests of the community are. It's always an interesting conversation when you ask whether or not those interests align, whether they should align, whether or not, your elected official
and that's a tough
should
one.
Make that choice or not.
You're right, and it is a tough one, but here's the other thing. We had information that the public didn't have, and the reason that we had it was because it was under a confidentiality agreement. I deal in commercial real estate. That's all that I do is commercial. Leases, sales, business sales, and so on. Very confidential information, and you just can't talk about things at the risk of being sued, because that's what both parties have agreed to. You can imagine, and the union, there's a lot of unions that say the last place they'll negotiate is in public. Well, that's what would happen if the information got out. Now, what I can tell you is the deal that we told people we were getting is the exact deal that we got. So there's nothing in there that's any different than what we had agreed to before. It's up to the Ontario Energy Board now whether they see fit to allow the sale or not.
Mm-hmm. And, there's a lot of people, I'm sure, that are in the public that would say, if there's information that would sell us the deal and make us feel confident about that, then we should be able to have access to that information.
And we give them every single bit of information that we can. But again, there's legalese stuff that's in there. And it will come out. It's not a game changer, but there's things that you can talk about and there's things that you just can't talk about for competitive reasons and everything else. So.
Okay. I didn't intend to talk about the PDI sale either this early or to spend a lot of time in it.
I wanted to make sure that people understood why I voted the way that I did.
And I think I understand a bit better, so hopefully people understand that decision.
It comes down to dollars and cents. The ownership in this case, there was some cost coming down the pipe, no question, on the poles and wires, and that's what we're talking about here, that are normal, matter of fact, maintenance that you have to do, but it was still going to cost between $5 and $7 million over the next year, and that's money that we don't get to play with for the city and do the things like the road improvements or the arenas and so on and so forth.
And there are a number of, you look at the potential memorial center replacement, you look at the costs associated with the parkway, or even just improving transit or transportation in general without the parkway. But these are all things that need to be paid for, what might end up being $55 million can go a long way towards those improvements.
Well, and I look at we'll use the Canoe Museum as another example. It's not like I didn't support the Canoe Museum. I thought $4 million was too much. That was my own personal number that I picked was $2 million. Council voted for $4 million. I get behind it. Because once it's done, there's no point in rehashing it, so you get behind and move forward. And I think that that's one of the things this council has been very good at, is once a decision has been made, it's made, and it's done, and you get behind it and move on and go on to the next issue.
Now, I'm glad that we had a chance to talk about this. We're going to take a short break, come back to it. We're going to be talking about a couple of more issues, including transportation.
Good.
I think that'll be a good conversation.
Okay.
And we'll get right back to it.
Thanks.
All right, awesome. We're back into it, and let's talk about a couple of issues, including we touched on transportation a little while ago, but let's really dive into it. What are the transportation needs for the community, and especially in terms of the future of the parkway, because that's a big question right now. And there's a couple of transportation studies that are out at the moment, which are kind of aiming to fill in some of the gaps. But what do you think about transportation in Peterborough?
Well, again, I can talk from the North End perspective. Very disappointed when the Minister, Murray, announced that we had to redo an environmental assessment. And actually, it was on my birthday. It was September 16th.
Oh, no.
What a present to have for somebody that supported the Parkway. September 16th on the 2017. But what's come out of it is we know that the Deputy Minister and the Ministry recommend approval. So it was, in my view, a political decision. Where it should have been a practical decision.
And there were a number of letters from the public, 88 in fact, that influenced the decision to ask for that extra environmental assessment. So
well, here again, so we'll go back to the PDI or the or the casino decision where all the people objected, which wasn't the case, as we know, but the vocal minority was objecting, and in this case they got their way because it was delayed. Now, who knows, with this Doug Ford government, I suspect, I'm hoping that they'll take another look at it.
Yeah, that is a new factor in the equation. Is the Doug Ford government, they might come in and say, oh, you've already done the environmental assessment, why would you need to do another one?
Well, Taylor, let me tell you, years ago I spoke with Malcolm Hunt and I said, Malcolm, who in their right mind would front houses on Tower Hill up in the north end, because that's the parkway. And he said, Dave, we went to the province and we asked them if we could back the houses onto Tower Hill, because that was Ontario land development land. You're too young to remember, but Ontario had a development corp at that time, and they put the land out with very few restrictions on it, other than the houses had to come in under $100,000, and then they sold it off to all the builders. He said, Dave, here's what the province told us. Oh no, they can be fronted on there because you've got the parkway, which is a half a block south, that's going to be built. And then they're stopping the same thing. So unfortunately, the people in Tower Hill that bought in good faith now are on the parkway.
Yeah, and there is an assumption that because the parkway is written into the official plan, that is going to be built. And we've kind of been waiting and expecting that it's going to be built for years now.
Keep our fingers crossed.
So what's the plan then? What are the next steps?
Well, for me, and Andrew and I talked about this. Andrew and I were very lucky. We communicate daily on things. We've been friends for many, many years before we got involved in politics. What I would like to see is from Cumberland to Chemong Road, or 5-lane in Chemong, that I'd like to see, and then see what happens to the traffic, because I'm willing to bet you that's 80% of the problem will be solved off of Royal, Marina, Wolseley, Franklin, Cumberland, you name the street. That's what I would like to see. I think it's worth doing. Just to move it on to Chemong. As you know, the city has purchased property on Chemong. They're widening Chemong. They're putting in a center turning lane, which will definitely help. That could be a partial solution without even looking at going to Fairburn or over Jackson's Park with a bridge.
Mm-hmm. And I know, Park Hill has been talked about as well in terms of, widening that. And what then is the fate of the parkway? Because right now, like I said before, we have some studies that are going out right now. Is it getting to the point where the parkway, it's been on the official plan for too long, it hasn't been built for too many years, the cost is getting up there. Are we getting to the point where we need to start looking at alternatives like widening Chemong and Park Hill, or transit
in conjunction with
in conjunction with?
Well, here's what I'm told through the engineering department and the transportation department. Pick a figure for the parkway. Pick 1 million, 100 million, $1 billion.
There we go.
Whatever it is, it's 25% more for the other solutions. That's what they've determined, because you're working with existing product versus new product. And that's always, it's like renovating a house versus building a house. Far cheaper to build a house than it is to renovate one. Far cheaper to build a road than it is to renovate a road. And those are facts. I'm not an engineer, but I know enough about the building industry that's a fact of life. So when you look at that, people say to me, Dave, how can you even consider building a parkway when our roads are falling apart? Well, our roads are falling apart because they're taking traffic that it was never designed to be on those roads. I spoke with Wayne Jackson, and I said, Wayne, how many road types do we build? There's 4 different road types that we built, and they're built to different grades for different volumes. The North End streets aren't built to the Lansdowne standard that we need for the traffic. So.
Mm-hmm. And there are streets that are suffering because of that. You have streets like Goodfill. You have streets like Fairbarn is probably the key example. There's the residential street I cut through to get to work, which is High Street, which there are times when that gets backed up pretty bad. But you have all these residential streets that are suffering from traffic that they were never designed to accommodate.
That's right. And people wonder why the streets are falling apart. That's why.
Yeah, so I think people are just right now looking for a solution. And there are some people who don't care if it's the parkway. Personally, I don't care if it's the parkway or not. I'm just looking for something to get traffic moving faster. More importantly, get it moving faster before we get this oncoming wave of growth that we're expecting with the
well, and I can
forest.
speak to that growth because I do raw land development. That's what I do, and I deal with developers from across Canada. Kelowna, BC, they're in town. Why are they flocking to Peterborough? Because of the 407, the 115. At our office, we have Monday morning meetings. Dave Smith, who's been doing this for 35 years, said we are to the GTA what Barrie was to Toronto 30 years ago, what Brooklyn was 30 years ago. And look at Brooklyn, look at Barrie. We're in the same position. There isn't enough commercial properties, whether it's building or whatever. I've got a list of 30 people that are waiting to buy certain properties, and they're just harder to come by because we were in Money Sense magazine as one of the top 20 places to invest in Canada, and I had a company come from Kelowna, BC, and I asked them specifically, why did you center on Peterborough? They said, well, we have our own metrics that we use, but Money Sense magazine also was one of the key factors, and they want to get into this town, and they want to do development, and they want to do it downtown, which is amazing. But we have the Schedule J that we haven't worked out, where the heritage buildings and all those things are. We still have to work on those with the official plan.
And let's talk a little bit about growth and development in Peterborough as well, because right now we have some subdivisions that are being planned. We've got Lily Lake Road, which is going to be a huge housing project that's being worked on right now. Which Ashborough Village, which is in Ashburnham Ward, which received the draft plan of subdivision, got approval the other night, initial approval. So there are housing developments that are going on right now, but the question is it enough for this wave of growth that we're going to be expecting?
So on top of that, let's talk about affordable housing, because that's one of the things that people have asked me about. And I say all the city can do is buy housing stock and rent it back at below market rate. That's what we do with Peterborough Housing, which is a good cause. We're shy 1,500 or 1,700 rental units. But we're doing the best that we can. We put 240 units in the last 4 years into the housing stock. One of the problems that I see, and I see it daily because I'm in real estate, is these are all actions or reactions caused by provincial policy statements. And the province has boxed people in where you can't build. I don't know, well, Taylor, you're still young. I don't know if you have your first home, but my first home was a starter home.
Oh, I have no ambitions of ever owning a home, by the way.
Well, get into real estate. Invest in real estate, my boy, as they say. But my first home was a starter home, and I fixed it up. Then I sold it, then I moved up, and that's what I did. People don't have that option today. Why? Because people aren't moving houses because you can't build a house. You can't build, people want single family homes, you can't build them. It's multi-residential. So until we open that up, and I'm not talking about unbridled development, not by any means, but until you open the market up to what people want to buy, which is single-family homes, is what I'm being told from the developers that I deal with, you'll never have that trickle down where the person at the $200,000 or $250,000 home's moving up to a $300,000 or $400,000 home. That person's moving up to a $500,000, $600,000 home. That's the way it's always been. Right now, everybody's sitting pat because the $200,000, $250,000 home's $400,000. So that's one of the problems. And affordability. It's because you aren't building houses, single-family homes. That's what people want. Not all people want to live in an apartment. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Actually, the seniors tend to gravitate more towards the apartment living because they can turn the key, go away, and they're in Florida. And they like that because it's stress-free. But what's it do for everybody else? So I think that's one of the key issues that we have is the provincial policies are so tight on development. I was at a meeting on the weekend. Take a lot on Champlain Drive. They're 100 feet wide by 200 feet. Nothing stops somebody from coming in and buying one house, tearing it down and putting 3 up. 33-foot lots. And it's you can't fight it because that's a provincial policy. It's infilling. So that's one thing is the affordable housing. The city doesn't control affordable housing. We can buy housing stock and rent it out cheap, but it becomes affordable because we're willing to invest in it.
So what do you think then of negotiating, or not negotiating, but talking with developers and arranging it so that, if you look at the Lily Lake Road subdivision, that was a situation where the city went back and forth with the developer, and a greater mix of housing types was eventually made its way into that plan. So what do you think of that type of strategy of having different housing types?
Nothing wrong with that at all. But what's happening is in Toronto, you don't have those options. You have to build high density housing. So there isn't a mix of starter residential homes with townhomes or with condominiums and rental apartments. There's not that mix in Toronto. So that's putting pressure. Toronto's putting pressure on everybody else because people are saying, I don't want to live in an apartment, so I'll move out. So they move to Oshawa. People go, wow, I can't afford to buy in Oshawa, so I'll move to Clarington. I can't afford to Clarington. I'm coming up the 115. There's a 340 home subdivision in Millbrook that's sold out in a month.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, homes are
brand new, and you drive through that, and there's 30 houses going up every week. It's amazing to see, and that's what's coming.
Yeah, and there are various townships around us that are benefiting from that.
Be thankful that it is.
So then, what's with Peterborough? What do we have to do? Because let's say the province might change those rules. So a lot of those rules were put in place by the previous liberal government, and that might change under the new Conservative government. But what do we do to encourage that type of development?
Well, look at Ashborough, the new development in Ashburnham Ward. Tremendous development with all different types of housing. That's what we do. Years ago, I lived up Royal Drive, Emerson area, and that was all the same houses. You didn't have duplexes and townhouses. You had all single-family homes, bungalows and side splits. Today, you don't get that in a subdivision. You're getting the whole cross-section of it, and I think that's the right thing to do. So I believe that we're doing well in that regard.
Okay. I guess the other half of the equation, too, when it comes to housing is jobs. It doesn't really... there are people who want to come into this community who they want a place to live and they want a place to work. And it doesn't make sense to have one part of that equation but not the other.
So all we can do as a city is make it attractive for companies that produce jobs. A government can't make a job. They can help with an atmosphere through breaks. So we did that, and people can poo-poo it all they want, but the casino's coming, and it's good-paying jobs with benefits. Queen Tech Commons, good-paying jobs, high-tech, more environmental jobs. It's coming. PDI, Hydro One is expanding. Whether they choose to build a location or locate here, they are locating here with 30 more technical engineering jobs. So those, you're not going to have the General Motors, you're not going to have the GEs anymore that you had. So you pick the 30 high-tech jobs per company and bring them in. Lifestyles that located down on Crawford Drive many years ago. Again, what's wrong with, I wish we had more of the trades jobs. Building dries up, your trades go. Plumbers, electricians, carpenters, those are all high-paying jobs. So all we can do is give them the opportunity to build, in this case, give them the opportunity to move into the city, help them. We're helping with the casino we're paying the charges up front and collecting them back over a 5-year period. Same with Queen Tech Commons. We'll be the landlord and collect our money back that way. That's things that we can do to encourage. But a government doesn't create a job. It just creates an environment for a company to come in and create a job.
Yeah, and I think Peterborough especially, we are one of those communities where manufacturing and industrial jobs, they dried up.
That was yesterday.
We're losing GE. Yeah. And we're
De Laval.
Yeah.
106-year-old company.
We need to be looking at solutions for creating an environment where, like you said, we want to be attractive to employers. So what are the types of employers then that we want to be bringing here? And I mean, you've used a few key examples like the Clean Tech Commons.
Yep. Well, the service job, there's no question. That's what Canada's running on now. But yeah, Clean Tech Commons is a great one. Concentrix call center, again, people poo-poo it, but they pay up to $17 an hour with benefits. Those are the jobs that we're getting. We're not getting the manufacturing. They're going all offshore, so that's a reality. We can give incentives for downtown, developing the downtown core, and I'm not exactly sure because it was before my time, but I think that there was some incentives given for Nordia to locate downtown Peterborough. You can just make it easier to develop, and that's something that we can still go a long ways on.
Where does small business fit into it as well? Because, I see the stuff that's going on at Peterborough Peterborough and the Kawartha's economic development. I see the Win the Space contest as an example of that. But where does small businesses fit into the niche in this community? Or maybe it's more than a niche.
Big businesses were small at one time. Mm-hmm. I look at our company. Jim Parks and I bought D&S. We're a small 7-man firm that does very well. But we expand as the market changes, and the 407 is bringing more opportunity to Peterborough. We're expanding. We've taken on a new person. We're adding another one. That's what happens when you start seeing expansion. And people, to live in the day where I don't want any growth, well, that's silly, because if you don't grow, you're going to die.
Yeah. And
somebody else will start picking at the bones. We need to get we do need to get some industrial land, and we're working on that too. With this government change, hopefully we can come up with a deal that suits all parties, because it has to be a win-win-win for everybody. And I think that that's something that we'll work on in this term of council again.
Okay. Dave, is there any other messages that you
want to send out? The only thing that I do want to say, and I want to make this clear, last time when I had election signs up, people were being very critical of signs without authority. Every single one of my signs that I've had on every location is approved by the owner of the property. So again, I go to great lengths to contact a lot of these people are out-of-town people that own it. Activa is owned by a fella in London, for example, and I contacted him and he said, Dave, you go ahead, thank you for asking. So, but that is a bone of contention with some people, so I just want them to know every single one of my sign locations has been approved by the property owner.
All right. Dave, thank you so much for being on the
program. Thank you, Taylor, and thanks for the
it.
show. It's been very good. I've watched them, and they're very, sometimes very entertaining.
Thank you very much. I try to be entertaining.
You're more than welcome.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, and to everybody else, we will see you next week.
Bye.